Welcome back to the show, folks. Hope you guys had a wonderful week. Hope that you're all doing well. This week, I wanted to do something because hurricane season is starting. For those of you that don't know, hurricane season typically starts officially on June 6th, which is in just a couple of days. And hurricane season runs all the way till November, and that's when the Atlantic is just spinning up these storms, and the eastern coast and the Gulf of Mexico become a shooting gallery for these storms just to come in and waylay us constantly. And so I found a legend. I didn't find it. I've known about this legend for forever. What am I talking about? But I've got a legend that applies to hurricane season. So just sit back and let me tell you a story. For this story, let me take you back to the year 1989. The Nintendo Game Boy was released. Gas was 97 cents a gallon. George Bush had just taken office. And the Berlin Wall was coming down. Yes, things were looking great for the world, except for that pesky little Atlantic Ocean and a hurricane that began crossing it in early September. I'm talking, of course, of Hurricane Hugo. It made its way to a Category 5 before making landfall as a Category 4 and did over $2.6 billion. This is in 1989 money of damage to the South Carolina coast. Now, because of Hurricane Hugo, we got a lot of things from that with FEMA. Things were changed because of how bad the damage from Hugo was. They actually had to change laws. A lot of people don't know this. But I don't want to talk about the storm that made landfall at 12:04 on September 22nd in Bowles Bay, South Carolina. I want to take you back to 12 hours before, around 12 noon, on September 21st, 1989, and a little place called Pawleys Island, South Carolina, about 45 miles north from where the hurricane made landfall, when a friend of mine had his life changed forever in a run-in with a very, very mysterious stranger. My friend Bill loved living on Pawleys Island. He loved the beach. He loved the ocean. He'd moved his family there about, 6-7 years before, in the early 1980s. His wife, he had a young child, and they really enjoyed living on Pawleys Island. And yes, word was that the storm was coming, but many people thought storms have come before, everything will be fine. And the people of Pawleys Island really weren't at first given a lot of concern. So Bill was out on the beach watching as the waves picked up and the wind came in. 12 hours before this massive storm, the waves had gone from their usual 3 to 4 foot waves to 6, 7, almost 10 foot at times. They were massive and they were crashing against the ocean, and it was just amazing to watch. And as he was out there, Bill said he saw this tattered old man walking along the beach. He looked like he was covered in sand and dust, and he was just almost like all the color was sapped out of him. And Bill went to go see if he was okay, and the man just gave him a forlorn look, as if he knew already that there was nothing he could do. And Bill had been around the local area, and he'd heard the legends. Immediately, he knew who this man was. He knew this was the Gray Man. So he went and told his wife to pack up some things for their child, and they loaded up into the car, and they took off. They headed inland, but before they did, he went into the local spot and let everybody know he had seen the Gray Man. Now, those who knew the legend and knew what it meant, they immediately did the same thing that Bill did, but there were some skeptics in the crowd. They didn't listen to Bill. They stuck around. 12 hours later, Hugo made landfall. Hugo battered the South Carolina coast for more than 12 hours. It didn't pass, even with the eye hitting it, 12 midnight. It didn't pass until almost 8 o'clock the next morning. At that time, the citizens of the coast of South Carolina started to sneak out and try and see just how bad the damage was. And I can tell you it was pretty bad because I was there. But those that went to Pawleys Island, they saw some of the worst of it. The storm had literally split Pawleys Island in half. Houses had been decimated and destroyed. But the interesting thing was that those that had heard Old Bill's warning and had heeded it and took off, they found practically no damage to their homes. They had weathered the storm as if nothing had happened. Now, it made you wonder, why? What would cause a storm to just skip one house and completely flatten the next three? It split the island in half, and yet these homes stood still. This wasn't the first time that I'd heard about the Gray Man. People had mentioned the Gray Man many times before. But this was when I actually just decided I needed to learn just who the Gray Man really was. The legend of the Gray Man dates back to the late early 1700s. A young merchant marine set off to gather his fortune across the ocean to bring it home to his family, and left from the coast of South Carolina. Now, the argument is made that it was from Charleston, it was from Georgetown, it was from near Debbie Doo. But whatever it was, when he left the coast, his ship sailed directly into a storm, a hurricane, and his ship was sunk. All life was lost. Now, of course, those back home would have had no clue back then because they couldn't predict hurricanes like we can now. There was no Doppler radar. There was no, meteorologists that were watching the weather. It was just a storm that would show up suddenly and cause massive devastation. And so one day, his friends are out on the beach and suddenly they see him. He looks battered and torn. He looks like he's been through hell. And they run up to him and, they go to say something to him and he just doesn't really speak for a minute. And then he tells them, a storm is coming. You must leave. And, they look at him funny at first, and then they go and they tell his wife, they go to get his wife and they go like, hey, he's out there. He says there's a storm coming. We got to get out of here. But when they go back, he's gone. But, of course, they went and they told others what they had seen, and everybody scoffed and laughed at him. But the wife took the warning to heart, and his friends did. And so they left their coastal homes and went inland for protection, staying with friends and family or at churches just to get away. And within 24 hours, a storm struck the South Carolina coast, right where he said the storm was coming, and destroyed practically everything. Now, this was before written records, so nobody knows really how bad this storm was. But that was the first appearance of the Gray Man. It wasn't his last. For more than 200 years, the Gray Man has appeared from as far south as Jacksonville, Florida, to as far north as Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. He walks the beaches, giving his warning to any who will heed it of the oncoming storm. He's there more than Jim Cantore is. And if you see the Gray Man and you heed his warning, you're going to be protected. If you ignore his warning, well, you're going to be up creek without a paddle. But of the stories that I've told, this is the one I actually believe the most because I have heard it from so many people. When a storm is coming, they say, so-and-so saw the gray man, so we're getting out of here. In fact, if you lived near Polly's Island, if someone said that they saw the gray man after Hugo, everybody booked. We knew it was going to be bad. And yes, the storms were bad, but the places were protected. It was like the storm took mercy on us because we listened to the gray man. That's going to be all for us, folks. Hope that you enjoyed this week's show. Hope that you found it enlightening. Hopefully, you guys are preparing for the weather if you're on the coast, and you're watching out for someone very shabby walking along the beach. Until next week, I'm Jonathan Phoenix. Remember, go over to Amazon.com and see if you can find a copy of my book, Through the Flames or Redcoats. And while you're at it, follow the link in the description and sign up to help pay for this podcast so I can make it better for you. We'll see you next week. Have a nice day.